documents, probably better than most. What do you think happened? Why is it that when Mitt Romney left the Bain Capital to manage the Olympics, Bain kept filing SEC documents, for several years, for 3 years, with him listed as sole stockholder, chairman, chief executive, and president?
Of course, we don't know, and I think one of the problems here is that Governor Romney has created a level of opacity around his affairs that has led everyone to assume the worst, and which I think, frankly, is just politically stupid, because what else can you think when he doesn't tell you actually what happened? One hypothesis that I hear in private equity circles that resonates with me as a possibility is, first, when he left to go to the Olympics, he didn't know how long he was going for. He didn't know whether it was a week, a month, X years. He didn't know whether it was going to be an 18-hour day or a 6-hour day. He left kind of instantaneously. There was no succession planning that seemed to be in place at Bain, and so there was no clear idea who was going to succeed him. And so they couldn't really file something else until they figured out who was going to succeed him, and that apparently, and it's not unusual that took some time. And so it sort of drifted along. They just kept filing what they were filing before because they didn't have anything else to file, and that's where it stood.
What about the tax returns? Is there something there that should worry Americans?
Taxes are as much art as science. And I think what Americans will find is that he pushed the envelope to the edge. He did stuff that simply ordinary Americans won't be able to relate to. The $100 million IRA, $100 million in trust for his kids, on which he will pay not only no estate taxes, but where he's, through a complicated mechanism, actually able to put more and more into those trusts as the years go on. I think it's going to make Americans recoil, and that's why I think he's not releasing those returns.
Do you understand why you'd need a Swiss bank account?
I understand the nature of offshore vehicles and why much of this occurs offshore. It has to do, like all this, with taxes. Not so much taxes for Romney in some cases anyway, but taxes for his investors with a collateral benefit for him. So, yeah, there are, again, if you say to your tax people, as he seems to have done, I want every trick in the book, I want to push this to the edge. I will tell you that as a private equity guy, I'm familiar with many of the things that he did. And I know many people who've done many of the things that he did. I do not know anyone who did everything that he did. And some of what he did, like the IRA, I've asked fellow private equity guys, none of us had even known this was a possible trick, if you will. So he's pushed the envelope all the way to the edge to his benefit, and I think Americans would find that very distasteful.
And that's the IRA that's currently valued at about $100 million.
But also some of this money that's offshore, he's also deferring taxes on until he brings it home. So every year, what's happening is the government is giving him an interest-free loan on all these deferred taxes at the expense of the federal budget, in effect.
And to the extent that this does rise to a larger issue, Ezra Klein in the Washington Post writes that the reason it's, in his opinion, it's worth talking about is that it shows that people like Mitt Romney and you have access to advice, mechanisms, strategies to build wealth that really ordinary Americans don't have access to, and that when you couple that with his agenda, which is to cut taxes further for those people, it gets to the heart of this idea that there are two Americas, one for the very, very, very rich and one for everyone else.
I think that's precisely the point, and I must say I'm ashamed of myself in a sense for not seeing it as clearly in the years when I was a private equity guy, frankly, having access to some of these tax management, shall we say, mechanisms. But when you step back and you look at this whole picture, what you see are two Americas. One where Mitt Romney can do all these things, not because he has good advice, but because the nature of his business allows him to have a $100 million IRA. It's not just because you're rich, you don't necessarily have it, but the nature of his business allowed it. Real estate guys, oil and gas guys, certain industries lend themselves to tax management, as I said before, that's very effective. Others don't, but the result is two Americans. So you can find plenty of rich guys out there who are paying 35% of their income in taxes without, even though they have great advice and all that, because they don't have the right kind of income, they're not in the right business. But the point is there are two Americas, and I think that is not where this country should be.
Steve Radner, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Up next.